Uh, if you want to share this with other folks when we're done, you are welcome to do so. If anybody is having trouble getting connected or just couldn't make this time. So first, let me say thank you. I know Mondays are sometimes challenging days, and I appreciate you spending your late afternoon with me. My name's Gary Falcon. I'm one of the co-founders of Twine, and what we're going to be looking at today is really our introduction to Edsby from a teacher perspective. So if you are new to Edsby, this is, you're new to the school using Edsby, your school is new to it, you're in the right place. Those of you that have been in Edsby in the past, there may be some of this that is review for you. Hopefully this will be helpful. And I've structured this, we've set aside about 45 minutes. That should leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So if we want to get into specific topics towards the end, if you have questions, that's fine. I'm going to keep the chat open. If you've got questions, feel free to put them there. And because it's a relatively small group, I've also allowed you to unmute your microphones. So feel free to jump in with questions. My agenda for today, what I'm hoping to talk about really are starting with some of the basics. I want to make sure everybody's comfortable getting connected and doing sort of basic navigation around Edsby. What is the information you set up for yourself? And then we're going to focus primarily on these things here. We're going to look at how to use Edsby to communicate with your class, whether that is a class of students or the parents of those students, how we're going to use our Edsby classrooms to communicate, how we can communicate one-on-one with colleagues as well as with parents and students. And then we're going to take a look at some of the classroom tools. We're not going to have time to necessarily get into everything that we can do in the classroom, but all of the basics, things like using the class feed to share information, how we can look at the planner, how we can use tools like the gradebook and attendance. So making sure that you're comfortable with those basics. We'll also talk about some of the classroom settings and make sure that you set up your classroom the way that you want in terms of how students might participate and some things that you want students and parents to see. And then I have a couple of recommended activities that I'm going to suggest those of you that are new that you'll want to probably explore when you get connected. So that's what I'm hoping to cover. Again, if you have other things that are of interest to you, I will make sure that you at minimum know where to go for help. We've got some great online resources to go beyond this. And if there's time, again, I'm happy to take questions at the end on other topics if you want to get into some of the deeper things that Edsby can do. I will mention Edsby is a pretty deep platform. There's a lot that it can do. It's important not to let yourself get overwhelmed. We're going to focus today really on these beginning tasks, right? How we can use this to communicate and keep track of the basic things we need to inside our classes, how we can use this to coordinate among staff and so forth. But if you want to get into advanced features like online handing of homework and online exams and building your own rubrics and some of those other things that are in here, you are more than welcome to explore that. You really can't hurt anything in Edsby, but again, today we're going to focus primarily on what's in this first column. So so far so good. Okay, wonderful. If there are other things you want to make sure we do cover, please feel free to throw those in the chat and I will look at that and see if I can work them in. In terms of getting connected, the most important thing to know, and this is going to be different since we're all from different schools here, many of us are from different schools, every school is going to have their own address. For some of you, it might be twine.edsby.com. For many of you, it might be, whatever it is, lincolnschool.edsby.com, whatever your school name is. If you're not sure what that URL is, please ask one of your co-teachers or an administrator there, and they should be able to share that with you. Now you can get to Edsby from any web browser, any laptop, any desktop computer. We do also have a mobile app. And so if you have an iPhone or an Android phone or a Windows tablet, whatever kind of mobile device you might have, you can go out to the App Store and download the Edsby app and install that. The first time you launch it, again, it's going to ask, what school are you connecting to? And so you'll use that same name. Again, twine.edsby.com or whatever it might happen to be, yourschool.edsby.com, and that's how it will know how to get connected. How you authenticate can vary from one school to another as well. So in most cases, right, most schools, you can log in using a username and an Edsby specific password. That username for staff is almost always going to be an email address, something at yourschool.org, whatever that is. And then if you don't know your initial password, as long as they've set you up in the system, you can go to the forgot password link on that main page, and it'll send you an email with your password and you can be up and running. Your school administrators can also set a password for you. So if you're not sure how to get in, you've never been logged in before, you may need to ask an administrator. You'll make sure they've got the right email in there, and then use a forgot password link or have them set a password for you. Once that account is active, you can always go back to forgot password. In some schools, you may be a school that is using either Microsoft 365 for your school, or some schools use Google, and they have staff accounts for all staff accounts on Google for that. And in those situations, you can actually just click the Google or the Microsoft button. And if you're already logged into your Gmail or your Microsoft account, it just connects you. So in those cases where you're using the Google button or the Microsoft button, you don't need to fill in a username and password. If you're not logged into Microsoft, it'll ask you for your Microsoft name and password, and that'll work too. So any questions on any of that? All right, great. Again, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute or post stuff in the chat as we go. So, once you get connected, that's really where the fun begins. So let me switch to my browser here. All right, and hopefully you are seeing now a screen that says Edsby, sign into Twine, and I'm going to log in here to school as a teacher. And this is sort of our sandbox school. I need to remember my password. Let's try that. There we go. All right. So I'm logged in right now as Mr. Lambert. I am a member of a school called Twine Academy. And this is what I get when I log into Edsby. It's showing me a whole bunch of information right up front. The very first thing that I want to orient you to, though, is where in the corner it has my name, right? It's got my name and a little picture here. One of the things I would encourage you to do if you are brand new to Edsby is to go ahead and set up a profile picture for yourself. There's also a little about me section if you want to share any information about, whatever your hobbies or something you think your students might find interesting about you. But over here in the corner, this is where, over on the left side, this is where you can go ahead and browse and put a photo in for yourself. One of the things that I think is actually quite important when working in online environments is we want to have as much of a connection to our staff and our parents as we can. And believe it or not, when you see somebody's face there next to their name, it makes a big difference in how they will interact with you. So I would really encourage you, if you're brand new to the system, it's going to show a little gray spaceman there. Go ahead and replace that spaceman by opening up the profile and going ahead and setting up a profile picture for yourself. So we can do that right here. The other really important functions under your name here. Notice that this is where we'll go at the end of the session to log out. This is particularly important if you are using your account from a classroom where students might be able to, walk around and see what's on your account. You don't want them going in looking at your grade book and so forth. And you can, if you want, explore other settings, things like your notification settings. All of that's available under your name, under the settings menu. In general, when it comes to notifications, they're really important for our parents. We find that students and staff usually will be logging into Edsby every day. And so Edsby will give us notifications inside the app for when there's new content. So I can see we've got one new message for me in the staff area. I've got a new message in my English 7. There's something new for me in my message center. So for me as a staff member, I don't necessarily need to pop up on my phone every time there's something new. If you want that to happen, you can set that up in your notifications. But again, for most staff, since you're logged in during the day anyway, you're going to see those things here inside the app. So any questions about those personal settings under your name? Okay, very good. Some other things we're seeing here on the desktop that I just want to orient you to. Across the top in the blue bar, this is really how I'm going to navigate the system. If I am out in my settings or I'm in other places inside the system, anytime I need to get back, I can click on this home link, or I can click on the Edsby button over here on the side, and that will take me back. And then these tools here, this gets me to things like my personal messages. I can see my calendar. And then we've got this rocket ship, and this is what we call the launch pad. The idea with the Launchpad is this is a place where your school can put important links that are always available here inside Edsby. The link that I want to call attention to that I think is important is this one here for Edsby help files and videos. We're only going to be able to cover, like I say, some of the basics today, but the Edsby help files and videos are really extensive. And so if there are things that you want to explore, we can come into the help files and go to this teachers page, and you can see that we have just tons and tons and tons of help articles. So again, how to set up an online assessment, how to build custom rubrics, how to print out my seating plan, how to do my lesson planning, how to set up weighting buckets in the grade book, right? All of the stuff is here. And as I go down towards the bottom, we have a bunch of videos as well, right? How to do late slips and all kinds of things, right? How to use the Edsby mobile app, an overview of the grade book. I really encourage you, if there are things you want to explore, this is a great resource. So again, to get to this, I was in Edsby, I came under the rocket ship and went to the launch pad and went to Edsby help files and videos. So please remember that that's there, and this is a great place to explore when we get done with the session here today. The rest of what's on the desktop is all content that is shared with me because Edsby thinks this is stuff that's relevant. So across the top, these are our school-wide news and announcements. All staff can contribute articles, but these need to be approved by our administration before they're visible to everybody. But basically, once an article is approved, right, if we're having a parent coffee, whatever it is, right, that gets approved by someone in the front office, and every parent, student, and staff member that logs in is able to see, the announcement about this thing that's happening. In a lot of our schools, this is where school announcements happen. This is where maybe a weekly newsletter gets published. This is where we'll celebrate successes and talk about, exciting things that are happening inside the program. So in a lot of our schools, this is used really heavily for just general communications. On the left side, I have a panel for the classes that I am teaching. And because we just switched terms, I've got my current classes, and I can also see my recent classes. My classes from last year are up here as well. Along the right is a calendar, and the calendar is built for me based on the classes and the groups that I'm a part of, plus all of the school-wide activities. So I can see this is my schedule today, and tomorrow is pizza lunch day, and later this week we've got, apparently we've got a PA day on Wednesday, and parents' night is also Wednesday, and right, some other things happening. So Edsby puts together this calendar for me each day. This is similarly constructed for your students and parents. When they log in, they're going to see all of the activities and assignments in the classes that they or their kids are involved in. And then in the middle, we've got our groups, and we'll look at this in a moment, but a group is sort of like a class, but it doesn't have to be parents, it doesn't have to be teachers and students. So most of our schools have, for example, an all staff group where only staff can participate, and it gives us a place where we can exchange documents and have conversation and ask questions and do all of that just private among staff. Many of our schools have a leadership team group, or we might have parent committees or student extracurricular activities or whatever it might be. So all of those things can be represented here as groups. So any questions about what we're seeing on the desktop? Okay, wonderful. Let's talk then about how to use Edsby to share information. And the most common place where we'll do that as teachers is going to be inside our classes. So I'm going to open up, in this case, our English 8 class. And what you'll see in every Edsby class and in every Edsby group is that front and center in these things is our, what we call our feed, right? This is simply a place where we can share information. And the idea is, right, I have exciting news, right? I can come in and I can share my exciting news. Maybe I've got an attachment to go with my exciting news. So I'm going to, click here and browse my computer, or I can come over here to OneDrive or Google if I'm using one of those systems. In this case, I don't know, what do we have here? All right. Okay. Yes, we're all going to learn about training dogs next week. So we're going to go to a dog training, whatever it is, right? So we have exciting news, and here's the dog that is going to learn obedience training or whatever. We're going to have a class puppy. That would be exciting. Anyway, I can come and I can post these things. The idea here is just we want to make it as easy as possible. We can paste in links from YouTube. We can paste in Khan Academy videos, right? Whatever it is we want to attach in here. Usually when we post things in here, you'll notice that there is a reply button. And in most cases, we will allow our students then to also come in, and maybe they have a question, right? Can I bring my dog? Whatever it is, right? So again, if we want to open this up for communication, we can do that. And what's nice about this is it goes in once, or if a student has a question, I can answer that question, and that response is visible now to all of the students in this class. So it gives us a place where it's really easy to share information. As a teacher, I have some specialized tools here as well. Our students are sort of restricted to just notes or conversation. But as a teacher, I can also ask poll questions, right? I can simply ask a question and give my students one of a couple answers to select from. So maybe this is going to be something we're going to use as a prompt for conversation, as a prompt for discussion the next day. Or maybe I just want to get a sense of how the students are feeling with new material that we've shared. So we can ask questions. We can also create events. So if we really are learning about, again, maybe this is English, I'm not sure, but we're doing Call of the Wild, right? So we're gonna have to study animal behavior, right? Whatever it might happen to be. So we're gonna go again to the, dog obedience classes, and we're gonna learn about how we train sled dogs to learn about Call of the Wild, whatever it happens to be, right? We're gonna go ahead and put that event here in the calendar, and that's gonna be visible in the calendar for everybody. Journals allow us a place where we can share a little bit more structured data. So you'll see that when I create a journal entry, it allows me to tie this to a unit, and we can define units in our classes for curriculum. We'll talk about when we're going to do this work, and we can say, what did students learn? So in class today, we did these, 3 or 4 things, these activities. Maybe we're going to, remind students what's coming next. And when I share this, the journal is shared in the feed. It also has its own little panel here where I can go in and I can look at all of our journals, and we can look at the lesson plans that are coming up and get that sort of calendar view of things. So it's another sort of easy way to share information that in this case is a little bit more structured. So, and then I'll talk more about assessment in a minute. I want to really focus on communication right now. But what's nice about this is it makes it really easy to get information out to the whole class. By default, all of our students can see this. Usually we'll let our students respond. Our parents can also see the feed, but parents are restricted to only seeing teacher posts. So if a student has asked a question, a parent isn't going to see that question, they will see your response to that question. So parents can get all of those materials. Parents can see what's in the library. Parents can see what's in the content panel. So all the things that you as the teacher share, those are the resources that parents will have access to as well. And of course, the content on the calendar. You'll notice also in the corner, we have this notion of pinned items. The idea with the pinned items is that if there is anything that is really important that I've shared that I don't want to get sort of lost in the conversation, I can come in here and I can pin this item. And now this is going to get sort of pasted up here on the sidebar so that it doesn't get lost as maybe we have a whole discussion on this topic. So where we see this used a lot, if you are in a hybrid situation where we need to do things like share a Zoom link or a Google Meet link, pinning that so it's there in a consistent place is really helpful. Also, at the beginning of the year, a lot of teachers will do things like they'll pin their syllabus for the first week of class, or they'll pin the rubric for a project. Maybe it's a 3-week project we're working on. We want to pin that rubric and keep that centered. So that pin functionality is a really nice way to emphasize certain things that you want to communicate and keep front and center. All right, checking the chat again to make sure I'm not missing anything. You are a quiet group so far. So I'll hope that means we're on track, but again, feel free to jump in with questions. In terms of communication, the feed is wonderful for communicating to a group. There are times when you might also need to communicate individually with students, with other staff, with parents, whatever it might be. Anywhere where you see a name inside the system, or for that matter, a photograph, right? Here's a student, right? And I can hover over their picture and it's going to bring up, excuse me, let me hover and not click. We'll go back to English 8. Right? When I hover over a student's photo there, you'll notice that I get a menu that includes this send message function. And I can send messages from a bunch of different places in Edsby, but the important thing is that when I'm sending a message, it allows me to specifically say who it is that I'm sending this to. So here's Palmer Armstrong. Maybe I want to send it to his mom as well, and I know her name is Beatrice. I'm going to add her name to the list, and I'm going to say, Palmer and Beatrice, thanks for, whatever it was. And I go ahead and I hit send, and now I'm sending this message just to the 2 of them. So when they log in, right, they're going to see a counter on their message center, and it's going to say there's a new message, and they can open that up and read that from me. So we don't have to give out email accounts to be able to send messages to students. And I no longer need to know my parents' email addresses. As long as I can send them a message in Edsby, right, I can get this out to them. From a notification standpoint, when I send a message to a parent, we always ensure that the parent gets an email notification for that. So anytime I send something privately to a parent, they're going to get something in their email that says, you've got a new message from Mr. Lambert in Edsby, please click here. And that brings them into the system. It's really important that we bring them in because the goal is we want parents not just to see private messages, but we do want them checking and seeing what's going on in the English 8 class. We want them to be able to see their kid's schedule because that's where they're going to see what's coming up next week, or if there's an overdue assignment, all of that's visible. So the more we can get them coming into Edsby, the better. Parents that install the mobile app can also set up additional notifications where the phone's going to give them a pop-up notification to make a noise every time a new grade is released or anytime something new gets posted to their classes. So for parents, that mobile app we find is really helpful. So again, to get to private messaging, one way to do it is simply to find somebody's name like I did here, right? So I can hover over a name and say send a message. We also, when we're dealing with students in the student panel here, when I click on a student's name, it opens up a panel here that we call the panorama. It gives us a lot of information about the student, but you'll notice that that also exposes them the names of their parents. So if I didn't remember the names of mom and dad, right, we've got parent names right here and I can send a message. There's even a shortcut in here, right? Send just to parents. So here's a message to Palmer's mom, and I can send that from here. And I can just as easily do that from the private message center. So again, if I know who I'm trying to send a message to, I'll say compose message, and I'll type in the names here. And again, Beatrice Armstrong, and I'll send my message. And all of this works the same way. It doesn't matter where I am. As long as I know a name, I can send that message privately. The last thing I want to mention on private messages, there are times when I want to send direct messages, particularly for parents, and I want to do it for all of our parents. And so there's a function in Edsby. In fact, you'll see down here towards below my calendar, I've got a link here that says my parents. Here are all of my parents. So across all my different classes, I have 29 different parents associated with my kids. If I want to send a message to all 29 parents, I can come here and say message parents. And here's my message to all of the parents for whom we have accounts, right? If I want to filter that first, maybe I want to be just the parents for my English 10 class. Here are the 4 parents associated with students in English 10 class, and I'm going to message those parents. So again, if we need to get private messages out or sort of bulk private messages, we can do that. And this will send a message to each of those parents. They'll get the notification in their email and so forth. Any questions? Is this helpful? Are we good? Okay. All right, great. I will assume we are on track and that we're good with basic communications here. Again, if you do have questions, feel free to unmute. All right, so let's talk about some of the other class functions. So we looked in here in my English class, and I talked a little bit about assessment, said I was going to come back to that. So assessment is tied into, of course, the grade book. And assessment actually ties into a bunch of different areas of Edsby. So when I am doing an assessment of some sort in my class, right, I'll go ahead and create one here. You'll notice that it gives me this form where I'm going to fill out all the details for the assessment. So in this case, what am I going to call this? I'll call this homework. We can set up our units, right? So I've got a literature unit, a poetry unit, whatever else. What kind of assignment is it? So again, I might call it homework again. Maybe this is an essay, right? Whatever it might happen to be. If you are a school that utilizes standards, whether that is provincial or state standards or something like Common Core, whatever it might be, if your school has set this up, you may be able to come in here where you can link to the relevant standards for your class. Some schools utilize this, not everybody does, but again, if it's relevant, so in this case, we're looking at Common Core English Language Art, grade 8 standards. And if this particular exercise happens to be assessing these strands, right, these particular objectives that are part of the Common Core standards, I can link those in. I can also even search. So maybe I want to search for comprehension. I'm assuming that's a word that shows up in here. Okay, right. And so I can pick, right, the standards here based on even a search. If my students are handing this in through Edsby, I would specify that this is an online submission. I would specify a file upload. If they're going to, just write this and bring it into class, it doesn't need to be online. That's okay. And then the other sort of basic information I need: when is this homework due? Is this going to be summative or formative? So do I want it to contribute to the class average? How am I going to grade it? This again gets customized by school, but we've got all of the basic grade schemes in here. So out of would just be a raw number. We have letter grade, which is A, B, C, D, or maybe A minus, B plus, et cetera, depending on what your school has set up. We can do percentages, right, 1 to 100, and even things like excellent, good, satisfactory, needs improvement. So you've got a lot of flexibility in here in the grading. You may see some things that are specific to your school or your jurisdiction. And since I don't know where everybody is from on this call, again, please ask questions if there are things that you need to do here that I'm not touching on. So if you have questions on that. For simplicity right now, I'm going to come in and let's use letter grade. That's fairly common. You'll notice that in addition to what kind of scheme, it's also allowing me to designate a weight. And what this is telling me is sort of how important is this particular homework relative to all of the other assessments of this type. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this particular essay, I'm saying is a 10-point essay. It might be at the end of the term, we give a 50-point essay, right? And that would be worth 5 times as much as this one. So I can set those relative weights. If I want to give instructions, I can, right? Please write something brilliant. And we'll go ahead and save this. Now, when I save this assessment, right, first of all, because I've chosen to make this public, and I should point this out, when I'm filling out this form, the very last thing down here is, do I want it to be visible to my kids or not? Usually, we do want students to know what's coming up, and so the default is that we're going to make this visible to students. If this was a pop quiz, I would say this is hidden from students, and then we're not going to put it in the feed, not put it in the calendar, right? It would just be in my grade book. But assuming it's visible to students, we're going to announce this in the feed. We're going to put it in the calendar so that when our students and parents log in and they're looking at the calendar, they're going to see that tomorrow we have an essay that's due, right? It's part of their homework. All the parents will see that. And in my class, it is also in this poetry unit now, we've got this homework that is the most recent item here. So that what this does is it allows us to really build out the content for our units. All of our lessons, all of our assessments are here. And when I reteach poetry next year, I don't have to recreate all of these assessments. So all of that's available to us and we can reuse it. From a gradebook perspective, it's putting in place a placeholder for me. So I've got September 14th, some homework is due. I've marked this as letter grade. So when my students bring in their work, I can come in and I can assign this grades of A, B, C, whatever it might happen to be. There are some nice shortcuts in here as well. So if all of my students really are brilliant and they all got A's, I can just do a drag down. There's a little tool, just so you can see it, that little block in the bottom right corner. So just like in Excel, I can pull that down. And maybe, maybe I want to modify it after the fact if I need to. There's a little status indicator here as well. So if you want to record things like, did it come in on time or was it late? Is this one excused? Or maybe, maybe the student struggled with this, but we know that it's not representative of what she's capable of doing, and I'm going to drop that from the average. So all of that's available with this little drop down here. And then if you want to kind of take the next step, there's a detail view for this. To get to the detail view, I'm going to go to the detail button in the bottom corner. And what I like about the detail view is it also allows me to add a comment. Where comments are helpful, right, is particularly for a C, right? And right, we're dropping this. We're going to say, let's work on this together when you're feeling better, whatever it might happen to be. When I click the share button here, right, each student is going to see the mark along with the comments for their work. So Carmen and her parents, right, will get this comment. Kyle and his parents get this grade, and these comments, and so forth. Until you click share, everything you do in the gradebook is private. You're the only one that sees it. But as soon as I hit share, then parents and students will know how they're doing. So fairly easy. Is this good? Okay, no questions. I'm assuming we're good. Some other gradebook nuances. In some classes, teachers like to create what we in Edsby call weighting buckets. You have sort of categories. And the way you might calculate your average is to say, we're going to take all of our homework and in-class work, and that's going to be 25% of the grade. And participation is going to be another 25%. And exams are going to be 30%, or whatever it is, however it is you want to divide that up. In Edsby, you can do that. And the way to get to those weighting buckets is here under the gear icon in the top right corner. So when I come to the gear, I can go to this edit weighting screen. And, I've done this before. Let me show you what it looks like if we've not put anything in here. All right, so when you first come in, it's going to look like this, right? So it's not going to have any weighting buckets. And what it lets us do, it says here, choose what's in this bucket. So in this example, if we want to say that homework and in-class work are going to be 25% of the overall grade, right? I'll come in and I'll say homework and in-class work is 25%. It also, if you want to get really specific on this, we can say what is a mechanism that we want to use. So do I want to use an average? Do I want to use the most recent scores to represent that 25%? You can come in and be as specific as you want to with that. And then I might have other buckets. So I might have another bucket for participation. And I'm going to assess participation different points throughout the term. And that's going to be another 25% in my class. And then we're going to have essays and exams, right? Essays and tests, right? And these are going to be, we'll say 40%, right? So I can come in and I can set up these weighting buckets. And as I do this, this is going to determine how that final grade actually gets calculated. Any questions on this or anything specific that you want to see? Anything specific that you like to do in your grade book that you want to make sure you understand how to do? Okay. All right. I will assume that we are on track then. So this is weighting. And again, just as a reminder, I got into this. I'll go ahead and save this here. I got into the weighting by coming into my class and then opening the grade book. And within the grade book, I came here under the gear icon to get to these advanced settings. And this is where I went to edit weighting. All right. There is a lot more we can do in the grade book. So again, if you like to do custom rubrics, if you want to have certain kinds of averages showing up in the gradebook columns, any of that, we can do that as well. I would say to start out, as long as you're comfortable coming into the gradebook, adding new assessments, and you understand that the calculations are working the way you want them to, I would say those are really the most important functions. So I think that's what I hope you are getting comfortable with here. The other really common classroom function, and you can see in this particular instance, I've been prompted to take attendance in every one of my classes. In your school, you may only take attendance once a day or twice a day, right? It might just be in your homeroom class. You will see the prompt for attendance both in the individual classes and on your calendar. So when I first log in, because we're at the end of the day and I haven't taken attendance in any of my classes, it's prompting me for every one of them. Typically what will happen is if you just take attendance in the morning, right, when 8:30 comes around, you'll get the button for your 8:30 class, and we can open that up and take attendance just for that. So the way attendance works, if all of my kids are present, all I need to do is click the word present, and it'll highlight this for everybody. If I have any exceptions, right, if this student was absent and this one late, I can change that. And then I'll click Share with Office. As soon as I click Share with Office, this is like running that piece of paper up the hallway. At this point, the front office knows who was absent and who was late, and they can make follow-up phone calls and do what they need to. But it should be that easy. So wherever you see that attendance button, whenever we prompt you on that, click Take Attendance, and you can set the status individually, or I can click the column header to fill in everybody with that same status. And then Share with Office. So I said I wanted to leave a little bit of time for question and answer, and we've got about 10 minutes remaining. Let me pause here, and I would love for you, if you have questions, I would love for you to unmute or go ahead and post those questions in the chat. And again, we've got a really shy group where everybody has gone to Starbucks and left themselves logged in. Any questions at all? Is this on target? Is this covering what you're hoping we'd cover? Jessica, I know you've got a whole group there. Are you seeing smiling, nodding faces? Okay. All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, let me do this. Like I said, this is the content that I really want to make sure we got through. A couple of things that I'm going to recommend for those of you that are brand new. So a couple of things that I'm going to suggest as sort of next steps. Next steps for those that are new. Oh, and I didn't talk about our groups. I knew I forgot something. Hang on. All right, so we've got classes, and we talked about all the things we can do in classes. Edsby groups function just like classes, except that you're a participant. You're not necessarily the moderator, right? You don't have control of the group. But what's nice about these groups is that they can involve any combination of folks that you want. As teachers, you are allowed to create groups. So if you've got a class of 20 and you want to create 5 breakout groups with 4 kids each, you can create those groups right here by going into the groups panel and setting up groups. If you are the the teacher of the robotics team, right? Or you're doing whatever projects, you are the director of the school musical, right? You can go ahead and create a group for the school musical and bring in your parent volunteers and all the rest. The all staff group, again, at minimum, I think every school has one of those, and I encourage you to use that to communicate with your peers. I'm going to go ahead and post here to the all staff group a couple ideas for getting started. So recommended activities. All right, when you get connected, please add a profile picture when you get logged in. I encourage you to open your classes and post a welcome message. And now that I'm thinking about this, I also want you to update the setup to allow student posting. And I didn't show this when I was in the class. I'm going to come back and do it right now because this is a really important permissions issue. So I'm glad I was talking about homework. So let me share this for a minute and then talk about what I mean here. So in Edsby, everything is really permissions controlled. You have control over what students can do inside your class. And at the school level, we can turn various features on and off. The default is that whenever we set up a new class, we lock down that classroom so that only teachers are able to post things in here. We don't want kids coming into sort of an unattended classroom and going crazy where a teacher is not actually monitoring it. When you are ready for your students to ask a question in the feed or to respond to your posts, what I'll ask you to do is come into the setup, which is visible under this little tiny drop-down menu, right? And in the setup form here, there is a permission where it says students can enter the class and participate. If you've never changed this setting, if you set the default is that students can view but not contribute, and this big red warning will actually show up at the top of your classroom. So if you open a class in Edsby and you see this big red warning says your students cannot reply or comment, this is why, right? When you come into the setup, change their setting to can enter and participate, and now your students can reply to your posts and they can add their own questions. We don't turn it on by default because we don't want questions going unanswered, right? We want to make sure that they're in here. But this is a really important sort of final step to opening up your class is come into the setup and change that setting. Again, to get here, I came into a class and I went to the little hidden menu here in the corner where it says additional options, and I went to setup. And that's where we can go in and modify the student setting. You're welcome to look through the rest of the settings. Usually this is the only one that needs to be changed, but if you want to make other changes, that is available to you. So I think that really is everything I want to say. Anything else I can help with? All right. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. If you do have individual questions, I'm glad to stay on. If not, again, thanks for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Gary.
My pleasure. Take care.